ATG Young Athlete Roadmap. 1, pull-up, but 2, matching your pull-up strength in Nordic strength. 3, full range push-up, matched or exceeded by 4, slantboard squat. 5, strong, and 6, long hip flexors, with 7, back of ankle, but also 8, front of ankle, with body weight lower back for good measure, and some form of sled plus a bonus of an adjustable rim, but not just increasing height once you can dunk. Increasing height once you can dunk, left leg, right hand, and right leg, left hand. As you can see, these are all realistic from a garage gym where they're buying or building yourself, and none of them require premature loading. Just because some may be unusual doesn't mean they're not common sense, and they work. This is the most meaningful video to me that I've ever shot. I started having knee issues around 9 years old. By 12, it was just chronic. By 18, I was chewed up and spit out of basketball. And had I known this stuff, I would have had a different life. I know this because at 18, going on 19, is when I started to get any clues of these unusual things. By 23, I got a full ride Division I basketball scholarship. So it wasn't too late for me. Now I'm my most athletic ever, my most bulletproof ever in my 30s. And everything here, it is easier to learn when you're young. So number one, if you're not a young person watching this, or if you're not a coach or a parent trying to use it for a young person, don't be discouraged, because there's other nuances that can go in and help us as we're older. Now, I'm going to go into deep detail on all these, but I feel like there's one key thing that kind of has to be unlearned before we explain these. Similar to I'm knees over toes guy. Before I start teaching this stuff in my other videos, I make an effort to try to unlearn the false data that went in about knees over toes. So I'm a basketball player. That was my sport. I knew from about 4 years old. By 5, I was in a league. By 9, which funny enough is when I started having some weird knee problems come in, I was already playing like crazy, no days off ever. I think I went 4 or more years without ever taking a day off from basketball. And as I said, by 12 had chronic knee issues. Well, I've asked people and been around basketball for so long that it's pretty clear the top 4 basketball players that are most commonly referenced as the greatest ever are MJ, Kobe, LeBron, and Wilt Chamberlain. Well, if you look at MJ, he was playing different sports. It wasn't until about 16 that he got super serious. By 14, I had the knees of an old man. By 16, he already had well-defined muscles in the areas that I didn't even start seeing definition until my 20s. Kobe grew up in Europe and would play a lot of soccer in order to make friends in Europe. And Kobe has spoken out against the American system of like everyday basketball. And when Kobe came over to America, he felt like he was behind other kids. Well, by 18, he was still throwing down between the legs dunks and 360s. LeBron was an all-state football player at age 16. So I mean, factually, I was before school, at break at school, after school. Oh, and Wilt Chamberlain was, even in college, was one of the top track athletes in America. So all 4 of them factually did not play as much basketball as I did growing up. I assumed that if I worked harder, that it would pay off. Hard work pays. You hear that. There's some truth to that, but if it's not on a route, well, it could just wind you up on an operating table having knee surgery faster. And that may sound horrific, but a lot of people watching this can relate to what I'm saying. So having the hard work is very much part of it. But these 10 things, you might be able to channel some of your hard work and not overdo your sport. So I can't speak on other sports. I'm an expert on basketball. That's the sport I've lived. And the top 4 players ever were much more balanced growing up and didn't overuse their body. So that's the number one thing I think that has to be unlearned before you learn this stuff, because parents reach out to me saying, yeah, but my kid doesn't have any time. Well, as we've gone over, this stuff can be in the garage. I promise you have time. Anyways, I love sports. I'm going on 2 years, haven't watched a single sports game or movie or anything. I decided to cut out entertainment when I have kids because I am a workaholic. I was a workaholic when I was 9 and 12 and 16 and 18, and I still am now. And I have 2 kids now, and I want to be a great dad, and it's worked really well for me. The point is that I promise every single person watching this has time to do some degree of this. 1 exercise, 1 set, 2 exercises, 2 sets, whatever. So now let's dive into the nitty-gritty on these 10 things. The pull-up would be, and push-up, simple examples, and on both of them, I like, even though it's upper body stuff, I like to get a nice full stretch, hold the top position. Like I still wanna own these positions. But if you say, you know, body weight training for kids, you think push-ups, pull-ups. So there's value in that. I got good at push-ups and pull-ups off work ethic. However, going around to something like a Nordic, this would have changed my entire life athletically. In fact, the freakiest athletes I've trained are super good at this naturally. And just like some of the freakiest athletes I've trained can do I couldn't do pull-ups. I had to work to do pull-ups. It's the same with Nordics. And I'm going to show you something. This comes from Marty St. Louis, greatest underdog hockey player ever. Hands behind back, glutes contract first, shoulder stays above hip. Meaning, if my glutes didn't contract first, if I went here, I wouldn't know, I wouldn't know how much I was really handling. And if I went up and then dipped here, well then I also didn't know how much I was handling. So to this day, I'll be honest, I'm still better at pull-ups than Nordics, but I think I'm getting closer. I just want to have even ability, and I know that had I started as a kid, I could have had even ability on these things. I'm still chasing that. I do think I'll get there. The point is that you can change your strength. And this is a really cool thing to learn, that your hard work does pay off, but it's just on what route. So getting good at pull-ups, but not getting good at this is not common sense if you want to have a career in a sport where you run and jump. The best example I could find of this was Adam Archuleta, who started doing this at 16 years old, and by 22, so 6 years, he became an NFL first-round draft pick and was blisteringly fast. But when he started at 16, his trainer said he had no hamstrings. They used to make fun of him in the gym. So he didn't, at 16, it didn't even look like he had a chance of going to college. By 22, first-round draft pick. So that was the only example I could find like that of someone starting it at a younger age and being consistent with it. But even for me, it took me like 2.5 years just to get one rep. So wherever you're starting, even if you're like me, I had my high school team's record for the slowest 40-yard dash. So I ran it in 6 seconds. I was 16, and the coach didn't believe it, and he made me run it again. Thought something's wrong with the stopwatch, made me take my shoes off in front of the team to show that I didn't have weights in my shoes. So if I was the slowest on my high school team and 2.5 years later I could do it, well, you know, and this was starting in my 20s. So you start this in your teens, you have even more hormones, less imbalances, less pains to worry about. So this, plus what the slant does, is no matter how much you want it to shy away from the knee, you can't not use the knee. You get stronger in the muscles around your knees, and you actually get stronger in your knees. I'll show the research paper, but when analyzing 164 different papers on squats, it is unfounded the idea that full bend, which requires knees over toes, somehow wears out your knee faster. In fact, doing that prevents degradation compared to avoiding that. It's an effective lower body injury prevention exercise. But what I'm not advising is just instantly getting under and doing barbell squats all the way down, which some people still have a lot of success with. And look, you could add anything to this. I'm putting what I know for a fact is going to build the foundation the best. So even just popping off sets of 20 push-ups, sets of 20 these, over time, you can completely change your knee outcomes. And that teardrop shaped muscle there by the knee, you'll really start to feel it in. It doesn't get prioritized just from anything, like foot positions have been tested, but something more recently tested what happens when you go all the way down. And basically the deeper you go, the more proportionally it is just VMO to get out of the bottom position. So I'm giving some scientific background here, but also know that I didn't know any of the scientific stuff when I worked my way out. I had solved all my knee problems before I knew about any research papers. This is something I could not even imagine doing without pain, and now it feels amazing, no pain, and well, there you go. More pain-free knee ability. Here, Then in the hips, I was super weak in the hip flexors. So those are the muscles that pick up the leg. You wanna get a stronger leg? Awesome, you better be getting stronger in the muscles that pick up your leg. Apparently those are the biggest size difference between elite sprinters and regular humans, but we don't see those. It's not like, wow, look at the size of that guy's hip flexors. So if you are now going a lifetime like I was of avoiding those, not to mention I had weak legs, but even once I started building my legs, it wasn't until after I started finding out about those hip flexors, and then I started seeing some of that more top end speed coming in. So the explosion off the line, definitely more about putting the power in. Once you start getting to top speed, you have to be able to pick up those legs quick. Some people avoid hip flexor strength because they think it'll tighten you up. Well, ATG Split Squat lengthens them. Elevating on top of something makes it easier to get into position. When I started this, I had to even assist myself to get into that position because my knees were so bad. So I credit that with saving my knees, but it's also lengthening out those hip flexors so they don't get too tight. So that plus some of the other stuff, I have pretty good flexibility. So clearly, look, I was weak and stiff. Weak and stiff, not so good. Hey, maybe being super strong and stiff might not be good, or being super flexible and weak might not be good, but I promise you being strong and mobile is better than having weak or tight links. So that handles that. And then we start putting on these finishing touches. This can be started. This is straight out of the Zero program, which goes into other details to help people rebuild weak knees. And so you can gradually progress this. A kid, though, can probably start in that athletic position. I mean, think if you're starting on the line, like you're in this position in football, in track. When you play basketball, you don't realize it. But the worst defenders are the ones whose knees can't go as far over the toe. So the more it can go over the toe, more you start playing like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was basically just the most, if you watch the film, he was basically just the most knees over toes 6'6" guy in the league, plus everything else. I worship Michael Jordan, so I don't want it to be interpreted the wrong way. So you can get into this position, hold strong, and then you're flexing up, which is getting to a lower, deeper calf muscle. So it's not really the one that you see, it's lower and deeper, called the soleus. Now, pound for pound, that muscle has the strongest pull of any muscle in the human body, and the tendon right there, the Achilles tendon, is the strongest tendon in the body. So what we're talking about is that pound for pound, yes, people are right when they notice like the Achilles makes you more athletic. So I'm not saying this can cause like genetic changes to that, but at least by strengthening it, you're putting yourself in a good position there, and it's worked out really well versus leaving, imagine building everything else and leaving that weak. Well, the finishing touch would have to be the other side. Again, building everything up here, but not then training the front of the ankle. That means every time, not every time, but the majority of times that you decelerate for a jump or a cut or something, or to stop, you're right in that position. So the weaker you are there, more pressure's coming into the foot, the ankle. I mean, this muscle starts here, you'll feel it burning, but it actually wraps around to the inside of the ankle and into the arch right there. So the weaker you are compared to how powerful everything else is, the more you're gonna be breaking down the foot, heel, shin, and especially that inner shin is where I had really bad shin splints. And then even into the knee, like you're setting yourself up for trouble if you're built on weak ankles. So everything we're doing so far is pretty much getting strong to support your own body, but from the ground up, not just push-ups and pull-ups. Now, without any equipment, you can start doing that against a wall. I just don't think this would have kept me. I've done tens of thousands of these from the Zero program. I don't know if as a kid, if I would have gotten like super enthusiastic about that. But seeing some weight, it's not, you're doing it for high repetitions. It's not loading down on the spine and so on, which is probably in itself worried about too much. And if you wanted to lift weights, let's say you were in football and you had to start lifting weights at a young age, well, all this stuff is just going to help support you even better. Funny enough, a lot of the top players in the NFL, I worked with this off season, even though I don't have a football background. I think they recognize that, they have to be so big and powerful. It's almost like football players really have even more need for this stuff than, let's say, a basketball player who's healthy and doing well. So we've gotten through all that. I don't think you necessarily have to train the lower back as a kid, but if we're building all that, it just makes sense to be getting some strength in the lower back, nice extra effect for the glutes and hamstrings. And again, it's just your body weight. So it's kind of really safe preparation. We actually keep this, these will be out this month. We keep this in the living room. My wife will use it. We try to put everything she uses in the living room. The idea is like a home back extension. It helps her mother. So my mother-in-law, my kid's grandma had kind of like a limp, and we walk a lot, and we got her just doing this in the living room, and it helped her get back walking without a limp by getting some strengthening going, because you can hold on and like start just getting some. So the idea is you can start getting some strength and some stretching going without really having to learn any technique or doing anything risky. Now, I said that some kind of sled option. So this varies, right? Let's say you live somewhere that it snows and you have a great sled that you take outside. Now it doesn't really help you out as much. You can use like an old broken treadmill or a treadmill not turned on. That works really well for backwards. Maybe there's a gym near you that has turf and a sled. Interestingly, I think the more broken down someone is, the more they need the dead milling in the sled, because it's very gentle, like backward sled and dead mill. You don't have weight coming down on you. You can take really small steps. You gradually go faster. So you start getting some cardio and some leg strength. You get tons of blood flow. You don't have to bend very far. So that's kind of like our step one to even warm up into sessions. Then we start working through the ankle on up. So for kids, I actually think you need that less. However, particularly pushing a sled but being belted up and doing as much backward as you do forward, that back and forth in like 1 or 2 minute bouts, so that it's not like just like a raggedy exercise. You get the burn. You're burning. You're in athletic positions, and then you keep going. That's the only kind of extra conditioning that I personally believe in for sports, because I've seen it help people get so much more explosive and jump higher and healthier as a result. Whereas if you're already playing a sport, let's say basketball, you're already running miles and miles a week. So could more running help? Maybe, but there's an inverse ratio between how many miles you run and how high your vertical jump is. Doesn't mean you couldn't do both, but basically a 100-meter sprinter is going to have to keep a much lower mileage to be that explosive compared to a marathon runner. So I personally believe that if you play your sport hard enough, that's your conditioning. Go out there, play harder than everyone else. Try harder. I don't care if you get so tired you have to come out of the game. You're now pushing yourself. Try harder, get lower. What happens now as the season goes? You start adapting more than the other players. I think there's another aspect to Michael Jordan. Maybe he hit the genetic lottery. Maybe he hit the genetic lottery and wanted it more, and every game played harder, so naturally got into lower and stronger positions and naturally got more conditioned than his opponents. So that's my personal take. I don't want to be advising something that I think could hold back from the total progress. So 10, I guess you would say, is almost like a bonus. You can learn extra work ethic. You can get conditioning. But that would be the extent of the conditioning I would advise. And then, having worked with lots of athletes, a lot of adaptation occurs from which side you throw or kick or jump. But regardless of sport, it's easy in a gym to have like a little adjustable hoop. And a big part of the way I teach jumping is that once you can do a certain dunk, you now want to try to master that the other way. Kobe Bryant's the best example of this in NBA history, as the most career dunks off these various plants, meaning let's say someone can jump way higher like that than they can like that. Well, number one, imbalances show up really heavily in terms of being risk factors for injury. Number two, you could get into an awkward position, meaning you could be in a situation where you should jump off your right leg, but now you don't, and now you get into an awkward position. And sometimes when I'm watching back injuries, I'm like, whoa, that would have been just like a natural jump off the non-dominant side, but the athlete was too scared and didn't get into that position. And number three is just make less plays. There's no one absolute thing that makes you great in a sport. You could have a ton of flaws and still be the best in the world. But Kobe mentality is to have no weak links in your arsenal. So it simply makes you even more skilled. I even notice it in the NFL. I notice a lot of missed catches and the quarterback often confused. And I'm like, yeah, that dude can't jump that way. You can tell, like all he had to do was just jump. And in testing people are sometimes a foot lower. You don't see this in younger kids. It gets worse over time from the adaptations. You end up with weird overuses or a side that is more vulnerable because it's awkward. You even end up with different tightness that affects the lower back. And people get into back situations, but then when they measure, they realize, whoa, I can't even reach as high that way as I can that way. I was like significantly lower when I started testing this. So I'm talking using something you can palm and run and actually really reach and outstretch. No dribbling up and stuff, not sport specific. Holding something you can palm so you can swing your arms and you can just jump naturally. And then only when you're easily doing it on either side, boom, then you adjust the rim a little bit. So I hope this video helps. This was probably the first in 100 different takes in this because my son's only 2. So there's gonna be a lot of time ahead to work on this, but I hope this stuff can help. I have this stuff listed out if someone needs help. I think it's totally fine if someone is a member. And if you have any questions on your kid, I don't want to advertise this as something like that you should be signing your kid up for, but more like, look, ATG is a family business. So if you have a kid and they are doing any of this stuff, I would say at this time, I mean, we'll see what the workload is like, but I would say at this time, it's fine with me if you want to write in any questions. I think we can handle that workload to do that, any form videos or questions. But this is why I keep these videos up to date and I keep grinding and working at it and trying to make equipment to make the stuff more affordable or perfected in some way. And there's truly no words of gratitude for everyone who has made this ATG system come to life. So thank you. Hope you have a good one.